Okay. Let's see here. Welcome. Here we are at Avenues, Alumni Artist Talks, Printmaking BFA. My name is Mateo Galvano, and I am actually an alumni from Painting and Drawing, BFA 09 and MFA 14. We're here tonight. I'm so happy to be here with Dan Manion and Felicity Gunn and Chris Monday, all from printmaking. The focus tonight being, this question of this, what are the pathways? What are the diverse pathways that we go onto after receiving a BFA from studio art at the School of Art and Design? And so I'm just so thrilled to see all three of you here. What I'd like to do is just start with, I'll talk about some brief bios. And I'll start with Dan Manion, is a Chicago-based printmaker and designer. He runs Sad Sack Press, which is a collaborative small press dedicated to producing limited editions of fine art prints and objects often created from found or recycled materials. He received a BFA in printmaking from Ohio University in 2017. Felicity Gunn is a visual artist working between Central and Southern Ohio. Trained in print-based media, Felicity strives to learn about community connection in social and material environments. Her research brings to light unkempt spaces. An avid sketchbook keeper, Felicity is passionate about the practice of visual consumption. She received a BFA in printmaking in 2021. And Chris Monday is a writer and comics illustrator, as well as a songwriter, performance artist, and small press publisher. Chris's prolific comics, featuring a range of recurring characters and themes, are produced as printed bound volumes and online, available through his website. Chris received his BFA in printmaking in 2007. So welcome, everyone. And yeah, we have some different guests here that will be dropping in and out of the chat. One of them, Carla, is here. I see Professor Hackenmiller is here. And all of you visitors and guests that are coming to, you're welcome to turn on your cameras if you'd like, or, however that works for you. And also everyone should feel welcome to, I'm going to look at my chat here. I want you to feel, everyone to feel welcome to ask questions. You could put questions for our guests in the chat. And I'm going to just randomly ask a series of different questions. And our three presenters, you guys just kind of go at it however you want. We'll see where these questions lead us. So yeah, we'll just get started. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, we are recording this session and it will become available on our College of Fine Arts YouTube in a few days. It'll be on there. So I always have this list of questions, and some of them are rather general and sometimes rather repetitive, but let's see what we've got here. All right, so I mean, we've already established that all three of you are printmaking BFA recipients. So within printmaking, tell me about something that you, what did you focus on in your printmaking, studies? And why don't we just start with Chris? Why don't you get us started with, like, what were you sort of focusing on in the print studios?
So the medium that I most focused on was etching. And I definitely enjoyed being able to explore different mediums. But I mostly connected with that. And when I first started, it was like a clean slate. You know, it wasn't like the thought of making a conceptual piece was nowhere to be seen in my brain, but I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to think about it. So I definitely was coming into it learning technical aspects, and then the conceptual stuff kind of developed. And over the course of that time, some of my most successful work, in my opinion, dealt with some personal issues that I was going through that were difficult and also hard to talk about. And it found its way to the art and channeled itself through pretty beautifully, kind of like my first experience. I don't know if it's my first, but one of the first that I can remember where what I made, I was like surprised to see, kind of. And so that was great. And then I tended to make some like political work from time to time that I was trying to definitely get a point across, but also trying to be funny about it. And I found that with some of that, the fact that it was an etching made it even a little bit funnier to me, anyway.
So awesome. Like, why is that? Like, what was it about etching that kind of lent this extra sort of you know, relevance or kind of comic aspect?
Well, so one that I made was it was a pretty large one, and it was a skyscraper with like arms flexing that you were looking at, and in the foreground was the back of an airplane holding a knife, and it was like not that long after 9/11.
Oh,
And the title of it was "No, You Started It," and it's just like kind of a political cartoon, but like the fact that it's this old ancient style, ancient's a little hyperbolic, but it's old style of art, which I guess was, you know, one of the probably original ways to make political comics, but not so much today. I think just made
right.
a little more amusing. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying about that juxtaposition of this kind of, you know, more traditional format, instead of it being like something that is drawn like with a marker or whatever. But you're right that, you know, a lot of these political cartoons they were using etching and litho and other print type of ways. Um, so what about you, Felicity? That question being like, what did you sort of focus on in the print area?
So I kind of just followed the like path that Ohio University kind of sets out, where you can take a couple studios in the specific field. I think like your sophomore year. So right away I took screen printing and paper making, and immediately integrated that into my art practice. And I still use those specific mediums today. And then I did a little bit of, actually I did a lot of monotype work in a mono and litho class. Less litho, a lot more monotype, and still definitely pull from that inspiration, just getting to experiment with different techniques and bring out different marks and stuff. And then my senior year, I really kind of dove into etching with copper and tallow. And I found that medium has, for me, been the most rewarding. I love the process of putting an image together on copper, along with being able to replicate specific marks that I always love drawing with black and white, like black ink on paper. So that I was really able to find that mark in specifically like hard ground line etching. So all of those things I'm still very much, I feel still very new in all of those mediums. But I've been able to kind of explore that since graduating, and still have access to a lot of studios that kind of keep me going, and those specific ones.
Oh, I'm really glad. I'm glad that you have access to studio to presses and things because, you know, sometimes when people leave, you have to figure out different ways of doing that. And
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
so that's interesting. And, you know, I mean, it's one of the awesome things about being at the School of Art and Design is the whole printmaking, all of that apparatus, that whole floor, and also
Yeah.
the faculty and you know, really amazing kind of resource in that place. So Dan, what do you want to say about this thing of like what did you focus on in the print area?
I worked my way through all the classes. I was able to take the screen and paper class and the etching and relief class both my freshman year, so I think I was able to kind of jump in. And then I was also able to have some independent studies with Carla, and also take advantage of, there were a couple summers where I was sticking around town and was able to have just enough credits or whatever sort of deal we had to make so that I had access to the studios, which I am really grateful for. I think mostly I was impatient with a lot of the processes that took longer, and so I think I stuck to screen printing through a lot of it, a lot of my sophomore and junior year, and then I kind of did a 180 with my thesis and did a lot of woodcuts and triptych of very large MDF woodcuts specifically. Yeah.
No, it's really exciting. And you know, it's just so funny how, you know, just hearing these, just the words, the techniques, you know, these different, you know, screen and intaglio, like, you know, I just love these types of discussions because, well, I guess it is rather specialized. A lot of people don't know what this stuff is, you know, people outside of the art school. But I'm really happy to hear you guys sharing about this because, you know, we have people in the room and people who will be looking at this video that are, you know, maybe in their first year and they don't, you know, maybe some of them aren't really aware yet, like, oh, paper making, you know, is that a thing? So, you know, it's really exciting to hear you share about these things and also to see how it's so different for everybody. You know, but something that I want to almost go back to is, you know, before you went into print, you had to take foundation classes. And so I want to ask you about your experience with that, you know, and also just to follow up, you know, with you, Dan, about you were saying that in your first year, you were already jumping into some print and how did that come about? Like, because sometimes we don't get to take those classes until like the second year. Um, so what was the situation with that, Dan? Did you already come here with some experience in that and you were able to or do some special studies with Carla, et cetera?
I think I had studio AP credits, I guess, from high school, so I didn't have to take two of the foundation classes. And I really wanted, I like specifically went to OU because of the print program. And so I think I was enthusiastic enough and got the right permission that I was able to take it. Um, yeah.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So what do you guys just in general? Tell me what you think about foundations. What are your memories of those classes, and what was your experience with those? And maybe we'll continue with you, Dan. You know, you skipped out of a couple of them because of your AP experiences. And, you know, it's funny because a lot of times, you know, my main role at the university at this time is in recruitment. So sometimes students will come to me like you, and they'll be like, oh, I have all these AP credits. Can I not take some of those foundation classes? And I say, no, you want to take them. You know, I try to convince students to do that because actually sometimes people will come back later and they're like, I feel like I missed something. So then they'll take drawing and description when they're like a senior or something like this. But tell me, Dan, what do you remember about your foundation's experience, and how was that for you?
I honestly don't remember it very well. I remember I took a class with, I'm blanking on her last name, Courtney.
Castle?
Yes. And there was a project about converting, basically we all were given a 2x4 and we had to make it into something that didn't resemble the 2x4 completely. I remember that project being a fun little problem to solve. But I think mostly I remember making stuff that I was immediately uninterested in after I made it. I was like, oh, I don't want this thing anymore. I remember that feeling a lot with my foundation classes.
Yeah, like you were just kind of like, I need to move on and just dig into print and other studio classes.
I think so. I think also like I wasn't making anything that was good. I was just making bad work and was like embarrassed by it or was like annoyed. So then I didn't want to. It's like I think I just wanted to push out more stuff. That's where I was
Right,
at.
right. And what about you, Chris? Are you remembering things about the foundation situation? Was it foundations that started to get you a sort of into this idea of like, oh, I want to do print or like that sort of thing?
I remember I make a humble living. I'm a happy person, but like switching to art school, kind of like I started in creative writing, and I was just like, I liked it, grateful for the experience I had there, but I was just like, kind of like, I gotta go over back to art, and it was such a relief. And the foundations, I carry a lot with me from printmaking, even though I don't make etchings regularly. So much I learned there, but like the foundations, the color theory class was difficult, but I'm very grateful I took it. Um, Sculpture helped to kind of like round everything out. I loved ceramics, but I took a painting class with Robert Peppers, and it was like what I knew at the beginning of that compared to what I knew at the end of how to paint is drastically different. And because of it, I knew that I would always come back to painting at some point. I didn't paint for like 20 years, and recently, just last year, I had an opportunity to do a bunch of paintings for the Pink Floyd show at Memorial Auditorium. And I ordered 12 2-foot by 4-foot canvases. I ended up getting 8 paintings done for that show. Three of them maybe were not that great, but like it is mind blowing how well it went. And I mean, because of that class and also the color theory class, like I was able to do it. And I knew always that like the skills that I learned from that one single class would like never go away. It was amazing.
Wow.
And then of course printmaking foundation class, I just like loved it and went that direction.
Oh, that's so awesome. What an amazing story. I love that. Um, and Peppers has retired. So that was pre-pandemic. Lucky for him.
To be clear, that's a Pink Floyd cover band show. I may have said Pink Floyd show.
Oh yeah, awesome, awesome.
It wasn't the real Pink Floyd.
Right. I guess it wouldn't be. I wasn't really thinking of that. Amazing. So yeah, what do you want to say, Felicity? I'm still sort of circling around this, anything about foundations. We're kind of looking at that as a sort of topic. Like, were there things in there that led you toward print, or that were really interesting to you, or not? What's up with that?
Yeah, so I feel like I kind of relate to both what Chris is saying and what Dan is saying with some of these things, where some classes really felt like I was connecting and like some of the skills, like foundational skills that I learned, are still with me. Specifically, like I took a class with Don Adletta my freshman year. He taught one of them description and drawing, I think, and he had a project that was like sketchbook every day. Basically, you had to turn in 8 sketches a week. So that completely like jump started or put fire behind my like sketchbooking practice. And I really value the time and focus that he spent towards that, along with many other lessons that I learned in that class specifically. But I definitely remember making a lot of bad art, spending really late nights in the studio. I have a twin sister who also went through the same program that I did. Or she did graphic design, but we both were in foundations at the same time. So it was like a lot of just like her and I in the studios very late, grinding, making really, really bad art. And I remember a lot of that bad art. So some of it's good and a lot of it was really bad. But that's what that time was for. So I was happy to go through it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. We have to make a whole bunch of bad stuff. I always think of it like sort of the miles that you're traveling on this journey, and it's not going to all be, really gorgeous. You're going to go through these difficult things, and I think, maybe there's a problem if everything we make is like so awesome and great. Like, I don't think it doesn't really make sense. So I think I really like the way you said that. I'm totally shocked that you have a twin sister. And so what does she have a BFA? What is her name?
Her name is Kira Gunn. She's a BFA in graphic design. Yeah.
I had no idea. I'm always amazed because I'm also a twin. So when I see
Awesome.
twins, oh, and also Nicole is on here and she's a twin.
Yes,
Yeah,
she's a twin
so
too.
that's right. Okay, twin action. Yeah, it's always sort of fascinating. Oh, that's really amazing. Yeah, so also, I want to circle back to Chris, like how incredible that you started with creative writing and you are, you're using that. You are a writer and as well as an image maker, and that's all those things kind of come together in your books and your comics. And so it's really interesting how that is that all the things that we take, maybe it might at first feel like, oh, I took a wrong turn or something like this, but I think all of this stuff ends up informing us. And so it's important to appreciate those places that we've been in that way. So also, I love this. You guys have mentioned Felicity mentioned Don Adleta and Dan mentioned Courtney Kessel, and Chris talked about Robert Peppers. Are there other people that you feel like gave you some interesting project or experience? Maybe that's another student or a faculty member or a TA or anybody else that you want to say anything about. I'm always curious to hear about that. You want to say something about that, Felicity?
Yeah, I would say at each stage throughout my time at Ohio University, I found many amazing artists and makers who were inspiring towards every aspect of my artistic practice at that period and still like heavily influenced my work. I mean, talking to like I think immediately I met Terry Davis, who was a printmaking grad student and then faculty, and he taught my screen and paper class, and that was inspiring getting to work with him during his time there. I also worked very closely and still work with Art Werger in his studio, and then I got to work with him through a PACE program, and I've stayed on as his assistant at varying capacities. And then, of course, Melissa Haviland is very inspiring and such a badass. And I love all of the time that I get to spend with her in the studio and then just like in the community. She's a really great person to kind of bring everyone together in her space at different degrees and stuff. And then beyond that, like visiting artists, getting to see people talk. I'm sure I'm missing people, but there have been many different people who have influenced my work during my time there.
Oh, that's so awesome. And yeah, you were here the most recently out of the three guests this evening, so it might be easier for you to name some of those. And it's so true. Like Melissa is a badass. I love that.
Yeah,
and
I mean, yeah, Melissa and Carla, all those guys, all of the print faculty are amazing.
right.
And visiting, like Zoe Kuva, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Zoe was here last year. I didn't even take a class from her, but she's just inspiring to be around. And then Aaron Foster was a huge inspiration for me. Getting to take a full year with him was awesome.
Wow, yeah, amazing artists, Zoe Couvillon and Aaron Foster,
yes,
really incredible.
Couvillon.
and you mentioned Terry Davis, who also has a lot of precision in his work and really gifted artist and educator. Yeah. What do you want to say about this topic, Dan? Is there somebody that was helpful or influential to you in some way during your time here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Carla and Melissa absolutely were extremely helpful, and I think were very patient with me being a little sloppy boy. And I think also, like, Melissa and David Colagiovanni, I think, were able to, I think, nurture parts of, like, things that I was interested in and pursuing. I think everyone was really supportive of the weird project space that I ran with Stephen Deffett, who's a painting major. I think all of that work it was very encouraging to have staff really try to push us, and also like push doing research around artist-run spaces in weird little micro cinemas, and I think that led to a lot of connections that both of us still have. I mean, I think we did a project where we were doing these interviews. We got a grant, the PERF, I think is what it's called.
Right.
I don't know. And I think all of that, like, part of my senior year, I think was so valuable. Just having an excuse to go to New York or Chicago and just like talk to people about the thing that they're doing, I think was extremely valuable in getting us to, specifically getting Stephen a job, but also I think opened more doors, I think, for both of us, certainly.
Oh, that's really awesome. I want to circle back around to that in a minute. The Station 116 project, and Stephen Deffett and all of that. But yes, but let's get back to. I think that I'm trying to keep track of our little lines here, and I think Chris, was there? I think that I wanted to ask you that question of, is there somebody else that you felt was influential to you, or even just gave you a project that sort of still sticks with you?
Yeah, I had in a foundations drawing class, which those kind of drove me crazy, but they were obviously helpful. Roland Beamish was a grad student teaching one, and I was doing a series which is like, as far as I can tell, one of the first like comic-like things that I went for. I did a series where I wanted to do 100 illustrations of this particular theme, and it was just with like a fine point Sharpie on 9x12 paper. And I did about like 7 or 8 of them where I penciled it and then went over it with the marker. And he simply said to me, "Why don't you just do them without the pencil?" And I was just like, oh, like, okay, like such a simple thing, but blowing my mind. And so I started doing that. And because it was 100, which I did go through and do all of them, by the time I was done with the 100th one, the confidence in my line work was massively better. And if I'm doing like a fictional comic where I want it to be a little more beautiful, I still pencil and ink it and do it properly. But for my journal comics, it's always pen to paper, which maybe it wouldn't be with that. And I'm telling you, man, I make tens to thirties of dollars a month on that shit. It's awesome.
No,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then one more person I took, it was a summer class, one of the ones that's 8 hours a day and only 2 weeks long. I took a bookbinding class with, and I think this is the proper name, Juan Rudy Barunacorn or something like that. I can't remember, but she was amazing. And that's another thing like the Peppers class. I don't use that skill very often, but I love to. And every now and then I'll make, like an edition of 5 hardcover comics of something. And that's one that I plan to use forever. And she was an awesome instructor.
Check this out.
Oh, yeah.
I've got this little baby here, and I think it's a very limited edition. You could hear the
That was my first comic book ever.
It's awesome that I actually own one.
Hell yeah, man. It's awesome.
Yes.
Oh, is that a hardcover one?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Eric the Monkey and Gordon the Explorer, or Eric and Gordon I'm not sure that. Anyway, there we have it. Awesome. A little hardback, cloth covered. Yeah, it's incredible. I really love these stories. And it's amazing, Chris, because I think of you in terms of that ability to draw all these different things. And like when you and I worked together at Salam, we were both waiting tables. And I was always like, I think you would even like or you would sometimes be drawing. And I'm just like, I was always amazed by that. And you would kind of figure out how to depict a certain thing that might be a little tricky to draw, and you would get to do that with your marker. And so I love that idea of this assignment where the guy was like, "Oh, why don't you just forget the pencil and go for it?" It's really impressive.
Because of that, I was going to say, because of that time at Salam, I'm pretty sure you're in Drink More Water a few times just in like work scenes. I'm pretty sure.
I think so, and I've heard about that, but I haven't actually seen those episodes. So that's an interesting thing we'll look at sometime together. But I love this idea, about these different projects that we've been working on, and to sort of cycle back to Dan and this idea because I had been wanting to talk about that during this talk where you had Station 116 and you opened that project space with Stephen Deffitt, and it's interesting you said this thing about how he ended up working in New York. And I ended up seeing Stephen in New York at a gallery that he worked at. And maybe he's still at that same place. It was like a big high-end situation in Chelsea. And it's interesting because the way that we got together in New York is that I was in New York and I was sharing some image on Instagram or something. And then Stephen was like, "Oh, you're in New York? Come to this. We're having an opening at this thing." And I was like, "What?" So I went and saw him there, and that was great. But, for those of you who don't know, Station 116 was it was a small garage that had been, cleaned out, and the walls were white or something like this is what I'm remembering. This was at 116 Lancaster Ave, very walkable from campus. And there were a series of these sort of like, the way I'm thinking about it, it was like these one night shows. Maybe they'd be there for a few days longer than that. There would be like, really festive opening receptions for these whole different projects that faculty and students did, community members. It was a great thing. I often spoke about that as it was the best of all of the galleries in the region because of the nature of it being something that was so immediate. The work that I saw in those shows was exciting and fresh and sometimes raw and like interesting and different. And I loved that it had been created sort of on a shoestring by a couple of students. So I have always had so much admiration for that space. Um, uh, is this Felicity and Chris, have you guys encountered Station 116? Were you familiar with that space?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely saw both music there, and then I don't know if I ever officially went to like an opening, but I was very aware of the shows happening in that space.
That's
Yeah,
so great.
I lived not too far from there for a while. I tried to hit a few shows, and I knew that, like, I knew at least your name somehow, Dan, and I figure maybe that is a part of it. I knew Marcus Pavlonis, is that his name?
Right.
Who used
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be there. But I tried to go to those openings when I could. I bought art, and I actually lived in that house when I decided to become a comic artist.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
I loved it also just because I used to live there. And the garage when I lived there was filled with a bunch of junk. We had band practice in there, but it was just filled with old junk from old tenants. So it was beautiful to see it turned into such an awesome thing. I loved it.
I love these types of connections. It's amazing. So yeah, Dan, you want to say a little bit more about that? Like, what were the years that was in operation? Because I think that you guys graduated and left, and then it was still going a little longer.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started it in 2015, maybe. So we had it took a while to get it to a place where it was, where where the walls were, stable enough and whatever. We felt good about it to start having shows, but we ended up, I think we were able to put out a lot of shows, and by the end of it, I think they were nearly monthly, which was really exciting. And then we handed it off to Maggie and Marcus, and I think they kept it going for a little while, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I don't know if the pandemic was something that kind of like finally put the kibosh on that, or maybe Marcus and Maggie left by then or something. What did you want to jump in and say there, Chris?
I just wanted to add, in addition to all the nice things that you said about it, which I agree with, one thing that I loved about it is that I was able to meet and connect with younger artists. I'm busy, so I don't get to get out and mingle too much, but it was a great opportunity to do that. And like Jacob Dawkins, Alexander Graham, like those two guys now, I feel I consider them friends, and I met them through that, and multiple other people. So it was a great opportunity for that outside of a more traditional commercial space, more comfortable.
Yeah, that's great. And you're mentioning these great artists, comic artists, Alexander Graham and Jacob Dawkins. Isn't he like a print person? I'm not sure if I have the right person on that, but really good artist, a printmaker.
I don't remember.
Yeah, he did some
This is what I see.
Yeah, I think he did some print. I don't know if he graduated specifically in printmaking, but he definitely was in the studios a lot when I was there.
That's so awesome. And well, before I go on to this other tangent, what else do you want to say about that, Dan? I wish that somebody would fire it up again or create these types of spaces. You did a lot of research about these types of spaces, like sort of nationally. I remember talking to Stephen Deffett about this book called The Contemporaries. I forget who wrote that book, but it was also talking about different places that were doing these tiny galleries, and I don't know what else do you want to tell us about that experience?
I think it's not as hard as people think it is to like set up a space. Like you don't need something that is really polished for it to be successful. And I think a lot of the spaces that we were amused by were like comically small. Like there's Catbox Contemporary, which is in a cat tree in somebody's apartment. Or there's this artist Jessica Langley, I think is her last name, who is now in Colorado, but she was doing a clothesline gallery, and so you would go into her apartment and look out her window, and there was a clothesline with like textile artwork being displayed above the courtyard, and now they run, I think it's called Yard or something, but they're in Colorado doing like front yard sculptures that are really impressive. They're really cool. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was like an easy, like a really good excuse, I think, to meet a lot of people. And yeah, it didn't have to be super polished. It didn't have to, I think like the one thing I regret is not doing more like zine swaps, or like we did like one like zine fest where we basically just like filled the gallery with shelving, and just anybody who submits a zine can sell a zine there. And it was just, we tried to get as many people as possible. I feel like that's something that maybe could have been pushed more, but I think just like easy to entry ways of allowing people to come into a space and show a thing and talk about it.
Right.
I think that's really relevant to printmaking too.
Sure. Yeah, and I think I saw that show with all the zines, and you maybe had some in the middle of the room as well. Or I might be conflating that with another show. But yeah, I just remember being like really thrilled when I went there. But also, then I'm thinking about this other tangent that I was mentioning, which is this thing like Chris was saying that you used to rehearse. So you're also a musician, Chris Monday, and you used to rehearse in that Station 116 space, like way before it was Station 116. And, just that I wanted to point out this other interesting thing about Felicity also being a musician. And so like these printmaking musician types, I don't know, Dan, if you're also like a rock star, um, as well, like along with these guys, but
I play the drums, but badly.
okay. All right, that's great. So yeah, I think because also, Chris, you have rehearsed in my current basement, I believe. Is this correct? Did we talk about this? I'm living over here on Briarwood, and I think that you said something about the people that used to live here, Andy and I forget, Andrew. And what did you play? Did you rehearse in this space at Briarwood?
in the
My
living room.
house? Oh, in the living room. Okay.
Just a light acoustic run through of some songs with Andrew, but still
Oh,
weird
okay.
energies,
All right, that's great. Yeah, so this idea about Athens and these little spaces, and if you stay here long enough, you're probably going to live in one of them or something like this. But yeah, what do you guys want to say about that whole, like, Felicity? And I keep on wanting to call you Fofo Power, which is your that's one of your
You can call me that
Instagram.
if you want.
That's one of your Instagram handles, and a lot of times I forget people's actual name. you know, because I'm thinking of them in terms of their Instagram handle. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your music and what's up with that?
So I've always kind of been in the music scene in Athens, dated musicians and just kind of been around music, and all my life I've been playing music. So I think there was just kind of like naturally gravitating towards like being at the Union and catching shows my first house show was at Station 116. So that was super awesome, and kind of opened my eyes to that, like kind of that culture. And I think the Midwest is really great for that. But currently I'm in a part of a project. I play keys and synth and different various instruments in various capacities, with a group called Big Fat Head. And we're putting music out there. Nate Hervey, he's also, almost everyone is an OU alumni, so we all went to school together. I think Olivia's on this chat. She's our bassist and lead singer, and she's awesome. But yeah, so we've been touring, playing music, recording. We recorded last April, and we have music coming out hopefully at the end of May. I think we have a show planned for Columbus, an album release and everything. So it's definitely like right on the forefront of my like creative practice, working with these guys. And it's been wonderful. I think just playing music in general, it's great to like be collaborative with other creative people at different in different ways. So it's been a really fun project. And yeah, we have music on Spotify. Shout out.
Oh,
Big
on
Fat Head.
Spotify. Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And also, you know, please feel free, you know, you have my email now. So if you have a show coming up, things like that, you can send me some info and I might be able to put it on like our social media
Oh yeah.
and be like, look what our cool
Cool.
alumni are doing. You know, because
We are
that would be
playing,
fun, you know.
yeah, we are playing Lobster Fest on April 12th here at the Union. So if anyone wants
Oh,
to catch that, that's like
oh,
the yearly fest for that.
that's so great. And also, you know, all three of you feel free to put in the chat your Instagram, you know, information if you feel like it, um, because then you know people could pick up on that stuff. Um, um, so that's really amazing. So, and let me ask you this. So, Fofo Power. Um,
Yes.
so do you feel like you were saying this thing of like, oh, you know, it's a collaborative. Of course, you're out there, totally out there doing this stuff in public spaces, and then like that's a kind of a contrast to the work that you do in your studio in some ways. What do
I
you
wouldn't say
think about that?
contrast. I would say that music, if you're involved with music and visual arts, at least for me, my experience has been it's very like intertwined. I do all of our like merch design, printing for that. I've had different hands at like creating album covers. I work with other bands that we've performed with. I am involved in a lot of different like music avenues, and specifically in Columbus, helping put on like festivals and different things like that. So I've had my hands in a couple different music projects in that way. And I would say even with printmaking, it being a collaborative, like you kind of work collaboratively, kind of naturally in the studio space because you're sharing equipment. So there's a lot of that like in tandem with one another. And I am definitely influenced by the artists that I share studio space in the same way that I am influenced by the musical artists that I perform with.
Yeah, that's so awesome. What do you want to say about that, Chris, about like this you know, juxtaposition or this intertwining, like the relationship between your music practice and your art practice?
Yeah, it's
You know,
interesting. I try to tie everything that I do together to some degree. Um, I am just now reconnecting with music after a long hiatus, which feels great. I knew it would come back, but it was kind of getting annoying. Uh, but yeah, it's when I used to play music a lot, if I got stuck writing something on acoustic, I'd switch to electric, and then I'd have like a refreshed energy. And so, you know, the more things that I do, I can kind of do that. So if, you know, if I'm working on a painting or a drawing, I'm just like annoyed with it, pick up the guitar, keep things flowing, stir things up. Um, and, you know, I like to just be in a band that goes and performs, but I also very much like to prefer to use the band and the performance as an excuse to do some weird performance art stuff. That just takes a lot more effort. So just playing shows is kind of easier without that. But hopefully one of these days I'll get something like that going. There was a 2-piece punk band / game show that I had in the works, but then my drummer moved to Seattle, and then when he was about to move back here, his hand got caught in a table saw. I think at this point his hand is healed and he's living in Columbus now, so maybe one day, but I don't know. But I also want to add, I recently caught Big Fat Head, and it was fantastic, like refreshing energy, totally awesome. It was a nice surprise. I went to see Dana and caught them. Great stage
Hell yeah.
presence. I remember like just like chill and cool and like having a good time. The people watching were having such a good time. I bought the CD. I've listened to it a few times. It's great. I love it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chris. That really means a lot. We have a lot of fun performing.
It's just thrilling. I love that type of connection. It's really thrilling. Okay, I'm going to get back to my list of questions here. Let's see. So, okay, so what about this one? What advice would you give to someone wishing to pursue this degree or this concentration? So maybe just studio art or maybe printmaking specifically. What kind of advice? And I'm thinking like if we have some guests in here that are you know, maybe their first years or they haven't decided yet, or if at all they're going to go into the BFA track. Maybe they're going to be BA and keep it a little bit more general. Or is there something about printmaking that you want to add in? So I don't know. You want to go with that one, Dan?
Sure. I think um, it really depends what you ultimately want, and kind of if you can imagine your life and what you want that to be like, and then work toward that goal. I think that can be a helpful way to think about what will make the most sense for you. I feel like for me, I was towards the end of undergrad, I was feeling very anxious and lost about what I wanted. And so it was important to me to move to a place with more opportunities. So I moved directly to Chicago, and was able to kind of play with certain avenues, whether it's production printmaking, teaching artist stuff. If I wanted to pursue like the possibility of an MFA, or was interested in showing in galleries, I think I got lucky in that I had a strong enough portfolio to get a fellowship at Sputnik Press, and which had an element of like professional development. So I was able to spend a good year with like advice on how to do these things and opportunities to try them. And I think that allowed me to narrow down a lot of like, okay, I probably don't want an MFA. All right, I'm not that interested in showing in galleries. I don't want to teach kids to screen print, definitely. And I think that happening like quickly really sped up my sort of decision making. So my advice would be to, as much as you're able to now or in art school, explore those different options for you and, you know, the fine arts community. and try them out. Or if there's somebody who has a job that you want to, or, you know, could imagine yourself having, if you're able to, I would reach out to them and I would talk to them about it. And try to get some, like, okay, what does that look like for you? What does it actually mean to be a production letterpress printer? That kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I think that's really, really helpful. Yeah, because sometimes we think, oh, we're about to get our BFA and we're panicking, like you were saying, and then it's like, oh, some of my friends are gonna go right into an MFA, and maybe I should be applying to MFA, and then maybe that's not actually the thing to do, right? So, um, is there? I'm distracted all of a sudden, and I'm wondering, Felicity, is that print on the wall, is that from Nudan?
I got it from, you probably know better than I do. I got it from the Majestic Gallery. In there, like, they had a bunch of work that was never picked up by artists, and so I got that in auction. So if you could tell me more about this artist, I know that they were like a student.
Oh, that's by
I would love.
Nuran. Her last name is Al-Hazmi. Nuran
Okay.
Al-Hazmi. That's a print by her, and it's like an award-winning print that was in a show here, and that is an awesome artist and student who now I believe is back in Saudi Arabia.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Is this somebody you were nodding there, Dan? Is that somebody that who you knew?
Yeah, and I think I traded print with them.
Yeah.
Almost definitely.
Right.
Like before I graduated, I really like their work. It's awesome.
Yeah. A
Mm-hmm.
really
Yeah, the
brilliant
piece is
artist.
huge. I love it. I'm gonna text you after this because I would love to actually get the name written down.
Yeah, I can. This way, I'll give you the spelling and all that. That's amazing.
Cool.
Wow, this time has gone by really quick. But we will go back to that question, and we might go over a little bit on our time, if that's all right with everybody. But what I was saying is this thing about the advice, and so what advice would you give someone going into this field, this into print or into studio art? And you want to go with that, Felicity?
I would say if you're like specifically with print media, it always helps to do a little bit of research ahead of time. And most of what I could say, like Dan kind of covered, just with like, find the people who inspire you and figure out how you can take the path to do something similar if that's what you're looking for. But ultimately, like knowing kind of what you're getting into ahead of time is always helpful. Showing up to a class if you're doing print, like knowing what printmaking is ahead of like actually taking a class. Sometimes it's cool to just like go into it and learn in the moment, but as much as possible, like doing that initial research and even learning about like the art that the professors or faculty or whoever you're going to be learning from, like knowing where they're coming from is really helpful. So yeah, those are some things that I would say about that.
That's awesome. What do you want to say, Chris?
I think there's a lot of different things depending on, what the person would want, but something that kind of how it worked out for me. If you're an artist who has just like interest in grabbing everything, you want to learn how to play guitar, trumpet, lithography, how to paint, how to make a sculpture, you just can't help yourself. You see something and you want to do it. And I think that by nature, maybe because I feel that way, I also want to like do things fast. I want to learn things fast and I want to execute things fast and be like, all right, I did it. I'm done. I'm going to go over here and do this. Printmaking was so appealing just because of the different options within the field and the different, when I was first walked around by Mary Manusos, who showed me various types of prints, I was really just fascinated by the different options within the one field. So within that field, I felt like I could grab so many things already. And then when I kind of funneled down into etching, then I developed a level of patience with art that really to this day makes a huge impact. And I still do impatient art. That's my journal comics. I look at pages of that sometimes and I'm annoyed by how crummy it looks. Where when I get involved with a project that I see more as an art project or a bigger project, I can really like separate time for the process and go through it. And I think that the training in printmaking, despite the fact that I'm not making etchings, still has a huge impact on my ability to do that.
Right. Yeah, I really love that. I can really relate to what you're saying, Chris, because for myself as an artist, I do a lot of different forms, and through my life, I've been very focused in certain periods on certain things, like musical or writing or different types of visual art, approaches or moving image or photo, or. And I think that maybe that's a special thing that we get to learn, is like to also be able to focus. So it's both of those things, like allow it to be all of those things, try them, but also that idea of being able to stay with a project and finish it and make it awesome, which certainly happens. It's like kind of a requirement inside of some printmaking techniques, that, there's a number of steps that we have to plan out, and this kind of thing is a good discipline that happens. Um, yeah, this time went by really quick, and I just appreciate the three of you so much. It has been really awesome, just to hear these different thoughts and some of the experiences that you had here. And I'm just so excited just to know you. And uh, I also, we have to wrap up, but oh, there's Carla in the chat saying thank you so much. Great to see and hear from you. And but I just wanted to say, anybody in the room, does anybody have a last question they want to throw into that chat there? Or any of our guests this evening, Chris or Dan or Felicity, is there a last thing that you'd like to say before we sign off?
I think I want to say it's specific to where I live now, but I have found that moving to a place that has a lot of resources and has a community of people that are making stuff is so instrumental in being successful as an artist. I think I think in particular, Chicago, I think, has a lot of options. There's this really great nonprofit called the Chicago Tool Library, where you can pay an annual membership fee, or it might be a lifetime fee of like, I don't know, $50 or something, and you have access to any kind of power tool. There are a lot of recycled, and reused, donated art supplies, weird papers and things. I think just there are really good opportunities in cities that could not exist in maybe a place like New York, where I think it's so expensive, it's sort of inaccessible unless you're coming from money. I think if you are not coming from money and you are very reliant on resources, whether it's from something that's donated or a sort of, collective, or whether it be your friends, I think it's just like, I could not have gotten anywhere without that sort of support. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Chicago being sort of, you're saying, a lot more accessible, a lot more doable than the whole sort of New York situation, which is not surprising. Anything else from Chris, Felicity, that you wanted to say?
I just agree with Carla that you should have a podcast.
Oh,
Yes.
did she say that? Oh, yeah. Somebody said that to me recently. And so, yeah, also Art, thank you for that. Art was here too. And saying how great it was to catch up with you. And yeah, Melissa Haviland is there, and Nicole, Malcolm, everybody's saying hello, and so glad to see you all. And yeah, that was awesome, just to talk to you. And I will send you some more information following up on this. Thank you so much, Felicity Gunn, Chris Monday, Dan Manion. Hey, there's David
Thank
Colagiovanni,
you.
another person who was mentioned in our talk tonight. All right, well, thank you all so much, and I guess we'll just say good night.
Awesome. Thank
Nice.
you.
Thank you so
much
much.
for hosting.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.